It is November 3rd, 2016. I'm Alex Ansary. We're going to do a brief overview on off-grid preparedness, kind of an overview of bugging out in today's day and age, contemplating some of the technological toys that you may have at your disposal, but also discussing some precautions that you may want to take, being that we're in a surveillance society and some of you may want to go somewhere where you are not tracked and not followed, where basically there's no trace that you're there. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm not an expert, but I am honest and transparent. And I'm going to let you know that a lot of the material, a lot of things that I share, comes from my own experience. It's also important to understand that when it comes to group dynamics and dealing with others, what I have found is, even if you're dealing with supposed independent, awake people, the reality is, if you're the type of individual that rocks the boat as a way of life, there could be certain social consequences, and there are people that are, unfortunately, in this world consumed with ego, control, things of the like. They have their own ulterior agendas when they set up their quote-unquote intentional communities. In reality, they're watching out for numero uno. Who is numero uno to them? There are certain psychologies that are very dominant in today's world. Some of you may have some of the same philosophies, some of the same ways of looking at things. Only the strong survive. Watch out for yourself. I'm going to say that there's a balance that we have to keep in our mind's eye. Okay, we want to have healthy boundaries. We want to keep certain negative influences out of our lives. We also don't want to become the type of individuals that the system wants us to become. Uncaring, unloving, non-feeling robots. One of the things that I've come to learn in my off-grid travels is that a lot of the off-grid folks are a lot like the people in the city when it comes to their political persuasions, a general disdain for Gnostic philosophies or thoughts, especially with regards to some of the things that I talk about. I've dealt with a lot of the same persecution. So I'm going to give you the advice that I follow myself. I would not give you advice that I will not follow myself. But I also can see how some of you can fly a little more easily under the radar than I can. There may be a lot of propaganda out there telling you to be afraid, and telling you to watch your back because you're white or something like that. And, for the most part, I think that a lot of you, if your karma's clean, if you will, your backyard is clean. You're not doing harm to others. In fact, you're doing good things, and you're not really rocking the boat, if you will. You're not really on the radar. I think there's a lot of possibility for you to get out of Dodge and be safe for you and your family. But you got to be able to detoxify. And I'll try to help you identify, some of the things that are out there. I've spent months and throughout this last year talking about the false Islamic invasion. And I talked about how this is really there to almost cause adrenal fatigue in today's survivalist. Almost giving society PTSD, all these warnings. Woman, be afraid of being raped. Woman, be afraid, be afraid. So if there is a time when we actually need to be getting out of Dodge, how many people do you think are going to be so numbed out because they were lied to for so long about the false invasions? So this is where we'll begin. If you're listening to me shortly after this broadcast, you're listening to this right before the next election of the United States, in which the American people lose no matter who wins. And so the Pentagon is prepping with their martial law drills, and other groups are prepping. But do these people even know what prepping even means? Or to get out of Dodge? And of course, there's preparing to be in an urban environment, and then there's going off grid. Whether it's going off grid or preparing to be in your own home, we'll start with, of course, things that hopefully you've already been looking at for 10 years. And so, it really needs little time to go over the basic of food storage, basics of water storage. And there's information out there available on water containers, accessing these water containers, storing water, and using certain things to disinfect the water. There are things like grapefruit seed extract, and that's something that you can put into a container after you've filtered water, for example. There's so many different types of water filters now. I'm telling you, the Berkey is considered to be, for the most part, a ripoff. And there's other more affordable water filters. You can make your own water filter. Food, I mean, that's something for you and you alone to figure out what it means to have 3 to 6 months. And obsessing with, well, what about after that 6 months? Do the best you can. Give yourself the peace of mind. And if you're in a situation to where you can grow food, obviously grow food. What I want to do, instead of go over all those basic things, I'm gonna continue to give you information that I think you can use. Information that I think is actually going to be more valuable to share than going over things that's a little bit more basic and clear cut. Water, food, shelter, keeping yourself warm, stuff to wear. I mean, seriously, there are books for that. So we're really talking about discernment between real threats and acknowledging there are manufactured threats to create certain psychological conditions within our society, to where there is political messiah worship, and there's also just absolute fear as we see candidates demonized. Both of them lifted up to be something almost messiah-like. I wouldn't say Hillary so much, but certainly Trump fits the bill in that regard. And also we can see how Hillary and the Donald are viewed as evil incarnate beings worthy of someone being sent to the other side. So I mean, we're being constantly bombarded with zombie apocalypse propaganda from the last few years. And we have the earthquake drills and the shooter drills and the terror drills, and now drilling for massive civil unrest regardless of who wins the next election. So location is key. I'll go back to what I've been saying for years. You should be going out and scouting the right locations for you. It may take several years. And I believe that more of you are capable of that. If you were to allocate certain money that you might be spending going out to a certain restaurant, or experiencing certain things, certain bills perhaps that you're paying in the grid, how much of that could be cut out and then money be applied to a trip where you take some time off. And I'm just giving one possibility of hundreds, but then I'm going to go to my next point. But I'm giving you an example. You take a leave of absence from your work to where you don't necessarily quit your job, but you go on the hunt, you go somewhere to some county or some place, you do the work. See, the next point I'm going to make, a lot of people are looking for an easy way out. You don't go to Google and you go off-grid community interstate here, or off-grid community Colorado. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry to tell you. It's a different America now. There really is a war on off-the-grid living. And so there are off-the-grid communities where people are living without $30,000 septic systems. They're living with compost toilets. They're living with trailers. They're living off solar. They're hauling their water in. They don't have wells. And the land use codes and regulations in their counties may actually prohibit them from living without a traditional septic system. But they're looking the other way anyways, and they're, like in Colorado, for example, in certain counties, with the legalization of marijuana, there has been an oversaturation. There's been too many people moving to Colorado, and there's a backlash. And so People, for example, moving to Colorado, for example, especially people moving to Costilla County that haven't done their research on the backlash on off-gridders, which started in recent years. Some of them showing up that haven't done their research online because, maybe they don't like doing research online, and maybe they only like to use the internet for Netflix and Facebook, and that's about it. They don't want to know too much. And this is a common problem with a lot of Americans. So they show up thinking they're going to survive something and start building something in Costilla County. And sometimes people get away with it for a little bit, but most people are just driven off. And because most off-gridders just simply want to be left alone, they're not exactly the types, most of them, nearly all of them, I found 99.99%. And all of those remain left in Costilla County. They don't want to report with media on what's currently happening because they went out there to get away from the cameras, get away from all this drama, get away from all this conflict, get away from law enforcement. And so, right now, we have the long emergency. It could be described as a long emergency. We have the post-2008, 2009 period, which is triggered growth in off-grid communities throughout America, where people just throw up their hands and, it's not World War III, but they're like they've lost everything and they're rebuilding from the ground up. And in some cases like mine, I'm going to end up having more than I've ever had before because I'm able to stop, rest, take a deep breath, pull that money back from all that money spent on the RV of driving from place to place. Although gas is still an expense. I mean, it costs $15 a round trip to go to town. But is it worth it? It is absolutely worth it. And there are many off-grid communities where they don't want TV shows, where they don't want, when I went to Costilla County, that was my first real, raw off-grid experience. And I wanted to share that with other people. I was very optimistic about intentional communities, and I was very willing to meet people and, share my soul, if you will. I still do that with certain people, and sometimes it backfires. I'm like, oh, I shared all this personal information with this person, and they're completely going demonic. Another reason why we should just stick to ourselves, like a recent example that I saw, which was somewhat frightening, where a person that I had been talking to off and on here in this off-grid area was getting very irate and forceful in saying that it's a physical impossibility for an ungrounded battery in an RV to cause a coolant problem. Well, that's actually what is the issue. Now, I don't know what's going on in someone's mind to where they're like, well, I'm going to get insulted because you won't just take my word for it, and I'm going to make this an argument. And it's like, dude, you don't have to make this an argument. This isn't an insult on your mechanical abilities. It's a statement on what I know is going on in my RV. And then I asked that person to leave the property because they were now yelling at me on my own land. And I have seen time and time again that the most important advice you can give someone is be very careful who you connect with off the grid. And so I learned this in Costilla County, and I learned this here. Be very careful who you invite or allow to come visit you. There was someone that actually came to visit me here. His purpose was to get land. And that was his agenda, and he fulfilled his agenda. And now I realize, why he was acting like he was, old jolly and, hey, Alex, how's it going? Yeah, dude, off the grid. When he was just arriving here and prodding and gathering his intel and then moving in for his own slice of the pie, which is fine. But I know the difference between people that are completely self-serving and people that are actually friends. And I'm able to see patterns to where, oh, there's a problem area, energy, anger, addiction, drug addiction, alcoholism, sometimes buzzing around a collective of a few human beings. And that is not energy that I volunteer to be around. I'm no one's counselor. And there is no reason whatsoever. I am not entitled or obligated is a better word. to be a friend to any alcoholic or drug addict. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there with a lot of serious problems, both in the grid and off the grid. And so this time around, I didn't come with stars in my eyes. You know, there's so much that I could talk about. I just want to keep this really simple. The most important advice that I can give you is be very careful the people you hook up with. Be very careful about your expectations. Your goal is to be independent. Now, I really can only give so much advice to those that are going to hunker it down and stay in the city. And I said earlier, you know, read up. Know your diet. If you don't know your own diet and what your family's going to need for months on end, I would start there. And water storage, being able to cook. I mean, it all starts with those things. You know, and heating your body and heating your home, you know, propane and things of that nature, you know, like, you know, that thing outside with your barbecue. Yeah, have lots of those. You know, have, you know, something that you can burn, for example, or, you know, there's all different types of ways you can cook without gas, for example. But you don't want to be dependent on the outside world, though. People going back and forth, oh, you're going to go to the supermarket and see if you can get, like, one more package of Pampers. If you're going to be in an urban environment, if you're going to make that decision as it is right now, I'm telling you, you're making a bad decision. If you're putting out to the, oh, I'm always stuck. If you can afford to pay rent, don't tell me you can't afford to find your way somewhere else. You know, it's getting out of your comfort zone is what you need to be willing to do. And maybe part of the comfort zone is psychological. Having enough money to go and travel. Well, I'll tell you what, when I went off the grid for the first time, it was the result of deep and serious prayer to the Creator for a place of safety and rest. And it led to the year in Costilla County with $100, a couple $100 in my pocket. And it was like I was able to generate every month several $100s just to survive. With my Honda Accord, like stuffed, you know, with a Mr. Buddy heater and extra clothing and food and cooking utensils and things of that nature. And I had everything that I needed. And what led to that was obviously the end of a job, the end of one experience, and the beginning of a new experience. And so I've told many, many people, if you're in this mindset of having all this money before you go off grid, I think you have your priorities backwards. I know this sounds strange, and I acknowledge that it sounds strange. And all I say is bear with me, and I look at my own experience. Now, a lot of you are couples, and as someone that's been single most of my life, and I've been on my own most of my life, I don't have complete empathy for the experience that you're having to where there's two of you or there's a bunch of you. But what I can say is I've done a lot to survive on my own without the help of others. Without immediate family, you know, within miles of me, for example. You know, I've gone through a lot and I've had to survive a lot because I've been alone for a long time. And instead of this becoming like some really, really sad story, it's more of a victory story. And I'm not saying the people around you are weight. What I'm saying is something in your thinking has to be upgraded because having love and having family is very, very powerful. We'll come back to this in another video, but if you're in a relationship or a friendship with people that are not on this level, you're holding yourself back, and that's the reality of the physical world. You know, it doesn't mean that, you know, you break off friendships or, you know, you stop seeing the person that you're humping. You know, just continue to be a human. If, you know, do whatever you do. But just understand that certain people are not with it. And they're going to think you're crazy. You know, some of you are, well, we're in a physical world. And I've been there too. You lust for your significant other. We lust for that person that we're intimate with. But that lust that we have for them, you know, he's caressing you and he's just going into you, and it's just animal season. It's just like that song, or you're with her and that rear end is up on the couch and you've had some drinks and some cigarettes and you got some music going on. You know, I'm not going to paint the picture more detailed than that. You're in lust, okay? You're in ooga booga dance mode. And what I'm here to communicate to you is that's not the same thing as being with someone that's actually a survivor, that actually will be a co-protector and someone at your side, and someone that is worthy of your protection. And it's not just male female. You know, there are certain men out there that are really boys that are not going to behave in a very conscious manner when the shit hits the fan. That aren't really tapped into their intuition to begin with. You know, it's just going to be like power struggle. And I can see that in certain individuals that I know. Ultimately, what I have to tell you regarding my own experience, you know, whether you believe me or not, it's irrelevant. But here I am sharing my story, sharing part of my soul with you, is that there has been divine intervention in my life. And ultimately, we can go back to when I started OTB TV. No one was really backing me in the beginning when I started my Access TV show. There's probably more people now that support the idea of a TV show coming back, you know, than say when I first launched. But ultimately, behind the scenes, there's been forces of good that have enabled me to keep moving forward and to keep growing. Whatever it is that I'm doing here on this planet, to keep growing, to keep evolving, to keep speaking, no matter what. To walk with a certain amount of protection doesn't mean that I don't face certain bits of sabotage. You know, this whole conversation about the supernatural that I talk about, there is something going on the earth, and by being aware of it, we are seeking to arm ourselves with the right information to protect ourselves, not live in fear. You know, and a lot of this archonic interference comes through people telling others your truth is a lie, regardless of whether or not they realize that they have become obsessed with telling someone else that their truth is a lie and repeating it like a robot. You know, and so it's not just about, you know, getting away from major cities before the shit hits the fan. When you look at what's going on inside people's consciousness, all these political deceptions, it's like, you know, it's like a joke, but it's serious. Is society becoming infected with something large? Is it contagious? But what I can tell you is I've seen the same type of inside the box thinking off the grid as I've seen it in the grid. So my advice is to get out of this mindset that you need this intentional community. And now my experience is going to be different than yours. And certain people treat other people or certain people a certain way because they want something from them. For example, certain men or women that want prettier women around are going to treat prettier women a certain way. They may see them as spiritual because they have this look. Whereas a male or someone that has a certain look that they've been predisposed to look down on, you know, perhaps I can talk in another podcast about having Middle Eastern features in today's society when I go into town on those days where I don't shave. Regardless of what's inside me, what the people at the market are obsessed on is what they're perceiving outside of me. It also tells you something about the consciousness of today's American, where they say, no, Alex, that's those things don't happen. And in today's day and age, there actually is a certain amount of hysteria that has been generated around men or young men or off-grid men or Middle Eastern off-grid men, which I think is probably just a really scary thought to some people, like Middle Eastern Syrian refugee-looking younger guy in an RV who hasn't shaved in a few days. Alert, alert, alert. Someone different in our midst. Someone different in our midst. Someone different in our midst. Scary. Unknown. Danger. Danger. Unknown. Scary. I kid you not. This is the world that I live in. So I can see in this world of physicality and mind control and manipulated intuition how there's been an inversion in value systems. So for me, it's getting away from people, places, and things that I'm dependent on and becoming independent in every possible way. It's like I met the neighbors recently and the guy's like, you're not off grid, you have the internet. And there are certain people that can only view people that go off grid with a satellite connection a certain way. Like the idea of working for yourself is a foreign concept, and I just scratch my head, and I ask the Creator for protection, for the right people to be brought into my life, but for the most part, it's about scaling down, and it's hard. It's hard, but I've learned a lot of really hard lessons in Costilla County, in Portland, Oregon, in other places. I will tell you that being a woman is different than being a man in today's day and age, in some ways. But of course, if someone is genuinely on the path of truth, and they're speaking out against the consensus reality, whether they be male or female, they may face that same persecution. The question is, how many of us can face that persecution and keep speaking our truth, to not allow ourselves to be co-opted? So there are certain intentional communities, and I'm just going to be brief, where the people that are in control, and sometimes it's the spiritual community, they have their own agenda. Now, the spiritual community, some of these people are claiming to be channeling ascended beings of light, and I don't believe that that most of them are. You know, people like James Gilliland in Trout Lake, Washington. And then, of course, there are off-gridders, and there are some people that are genuine. There are others, and I warned about this years ago. It's the idea of using people that don't have anything. People that are like on the road, oh, I need to stop and rest. Can I park at your place just so I can rest? Sure you can. Sure, you can come on over and park for a little bit. We can use you if you're willing to work. And then people get like that with their language. If you're willing to work. You see, there's a reality that there are certain people out there that want others to be their slaves. Okay, it's a reality that we have to contend with. And there's also the reality that some people don't want to work. But there's propaganda that's used, oh, those people don't want to work, when the slave master doesn't get what they want from the slaves. Or when others fantasize about being slave masters, sometimes they're unsuccessful. But I've noticed this, certain people online, 8-Digit PDX, who had kind of an unhealthy obsession with me, who only reached out in Portland and pretended to be a friend because he wanted someone to be his work bitch. And I don't have a problem working with someone. It's how you talk to me when we're working together. So there's a lot of people that are suffering cognitively, emotionally. Sometimes it's something that happened when they were in the military or with their father. There's different root cause emotional disturbances, related issues, with why some men or women seek to dominate other men or women. And so the dangers in putting yourself out there, being a lower income traveler, if you will, is there are certain people that are going to open up their arms to you, and it's because they have an agenda. And the other thing to take into consideration, if you're an independent thinker or a speaker like I am, is the spouse. And so for a lot of cases, it's the male that's watching my videos, that's understanding what I'm saying, but his girlfriend or his wife, very suspicious of Alex Ansary, very cautious, constantly getting bad vibes. Ooh, the bad vibes. Ooh, and I'm sure Dream Invasion's on top of it. And, when you walk as somewhat of a modern day mystic, an off-grid mystic, and you're also seen as somewhat of a conspiracy researcher, and you're dabbling in that world, which comes with certain energies. I mean, let's just face it. There's a supernatural hand that is steering the physical conspiracy. And when you actually speak about Sauron and draw attention to certain issues, you're not your average off-gridder. It's going to be complicated to coexist in any community other than one of your own making. To where you can't just, well, now it's time to hit the road, kid, because you don't like Trump, or because you don't like Obama, or because you don't like Sanders. And so for me, the whole thing was about, and it took years and much prayer, but eventually I found a county where I started to invest money in land. And I'm still doing that, and I'll be doing this for the next 4 years, investing. Taxes are like 100 something per year. When you compare that to what I had to pay for something that I can never actually even put my name on, whether you actually believe we actually own it or not, but to actually just be able to just stay somewhere and rest and maybe retire. There was nothing that I invested in or paid for in the past in Portland that went to anything that it still is in existence to this day. All evaporated. All that. This is what society is about. You go and you work at restaurants and you pay your rent and you pay your bills and you just stay in this hamster wheel. And the men will love you. And the haters will go away. And the women will love you. It doesn't work that way. Because I lived that way already before this path. I'm not 26. I'm 36. 36. I may look a certain age in a certain video. I may be a certain height. Kid, I'm not. So all roads for me have led to the independent path. And it didn't come easy and it didn't come right away. But between that period in 2008 where I first knew I wanted to go off grid and now 8 years later, 2016, a lot of experiences with other people. And other people have been the issue every step of the way. Of course, next to money. Because if I had the money to begin with, I wouldn't be traveling around in the RV trying to find the right spot for me or the right spot within Costilla County or the right allies. I spent a lot of personal time volunteering my labor, digging with a shovel, with a pickaxe back in 2013 for a psychopath Bible thumper. I'm not attacking Christians, but I think this man was anything but a Christian. He was really weird. It's like, yeah, I was watching porn one day and it was saying that Alex was trying to contact me 10 miles away. And I'm like, what is this dude talking about? He's talking about, the porn pop-ups talking to him and saying that Alex was trying to reach him. Or you've received a new message. And he's so inept technologically, he doesn't realize that those are automated bot pop-ups that he's seen. And it's like, and it wasn't long before he flipped out. And this guy was obsessed with talking about wanting to build his own chariot and be like a Roman gladiator and going up and down the road in Costilla County there at the Rio Grande Ranchos. There's also some information that's come out of Costilla County recently about a man who had his own sex slave. A friend of mine was actually living not far from the property. He was just absolutely shocked. He doesn't live in Costilla County anymore, but some dude had like his cousin or some retarded chick locked in a basement. And then a mother, and they lived just next to Blanca Peak, where I spent a fair amount of time parking on BLM land. She, her son, who was retarded, she starved him. And so he was found weighing like 90 or 100 pounds by Andrew Espinoza of Costilla County Sheriff's Department. What I saw in Costilla County was startling. And it was heartbreaking to see people not come to the aid of veterans that were being kicked off their land. And it's heartbreaking to this day to see that there are so many off-gridders that are so inept when it comes to organization that they're not figuring this out. The American people aren't standing with them. Donald Trump is not standing with them. Hillary Clinton is not standing with them. All these off-gridders that supposedly want these intentional communities need to somehow get involved and start websites, start YouTube channels, start writing letters, start getting organized. They can be of assistance to me and maybe a few other people, and we can develop a national off-grid alliance that will actually provide legal help for off-gridders being illegally kicked off their land. Where are those lawyers? So, if people literally want to have their cake and eat it too, which is to stay in the city, keep earning your money, and live off the grid, you got to get involved somehow. Or help the people that are on the front lines or being affected. If you're going to stay in the grid, and you're going to continue saving money. To just think about yourself and your own plot of land, that is disaster written all over it. So what are some of your plans? You're just going to go out somewhere in 2018 or 2019 when the shit's the fan and everything's going to be fine. You're just going to bring everything with you. And for some of you, I think that you may very well have angels that are actually going to get you out in time. It could be like a breakup. It could be a job loss. It could be something that indirectly gets you out of the danger zone well in advance before it happens. And perhaps that's the story with me. Because I'm not really ready for a long-term grid down situation, it'd be great to have at least a few more years. And practice gardening. I mean, next year is going to be a big year, and I appreciate all the time that the universe is giving us to stick our hands in the dirt. I'll also say that if people actually believe that the shit is hitting the fan now and that we're going to go to World War III in the next few months, instead of just see this as the theater of war, why aren't they going off grid? So there are so many it's like zombie think. I'm sorry. There's like these forms of zombie think, like death cult think, backwards think, that is dominant in today's society. And so if people are going to stay in the grid and plan to do things later, they need to be realistic. They need to be realistic about freeways shut down if they're in a major city, being locked in, martial law. They need to be realistic that, it's better to actually already be somewhere by the time that something happens, and to have your supplies there. And to understand there is a trap in this whole, okay, well, you invested everything in your home in suburbia. I mean, you got to be able to maybe grasp this concept that what you're holding on to may not be the thing that you want to hold on to. There's also times to buy and sell when it comes to commodities, precious metals, real estate. As far as I'm concerned, if certain people got out, let me just say this. If somebody decided to sell in Portland and they have been living in their home for many years and it's not completely tore apart, but even if it was completely tore apart and it's like in a bad part of town, or a part of town that used to be bad, like Alberta, which is now hipster apocalypse central, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars profit. Hundreds of thousands of dollars profit. I want you to think about that. There are people that are literally unhappy with their lives, and they're hanging on to their home, and they're worried every year about paying thousands, tens of thousands in taxes that keep going up, they keep going up, they keep going up, and they're planning to retire in an overpopulated city. One thing I noticed from the neighbor's an older guy, but the guy was always working, always sawing, always hammering. I'm like, all throughout this season. And I actually insulted him without meaning to insult him. When they came by to say hi, I offered to help him unload some wood. And because I offered to help him unload some wood, it was like I was saying to him, well, you can't do it. It's like some sort of a comedy from the Seinfeld episode, if you will, where the guy's saying, oh, you think you're stronger than me, young buck, and the guy picks up the TV set. For those of you that have seen the Seinfeld episode, you've seen the episode where the guy picks up the TV set and to show off to Seinfeld, and then he ends up in the hospital after he throws his back. But what I've noticed about a lot of the elderly that live off grid, they live healthier. They're breathing healthier air. Their energy is not being sucked by the smart meters. They're not up all night on the internet or watching TV. They're probably asleep by 9 or 10. They're probably up by 6 or 7. And my hours are pretty similar as well. And there's just so much energy, like left in the body when it's not being drained and we're not in an urban environment. And so I do think that being physically active and being off the grid and eating healthier, those are things that can help the aging process. And so, a lot of this is changing the way that you think. It really is. And are our thoughts our own? We ask ourselves moment to moment, We look at some of this fatalistic thinking, oh, I can't do that. And we see how human beings actually remain in dangerous situations, in dangerous environments, in expensive environments. What's really keeping those in those environments? All of these people. And I don't want to see millions of people just flee the major cities and start flooding off-grid areas. But I'm not speaking to millions of people, am I? Supposedly, I'm speaking to people that want to stay alive. Supposedly, I'm speaking to people that want to actually evolve. That want to unplug from the rat race. And I think that some of us are meant to live in cities for certain numbers of years. I think that some people can do some good. But if you're not doing great good in the cities, and if you're living your life like a hamster, you need to come to your own realization. Are you a slave to your environment, or are you free? Is there something holding you back psychologically? Is it this psychological trap that you need to have thousands of dollars and your own land before you, quote unquote, connect with nature or go off grid? And are you actually willing to sacrifice certain pleasures of the flesh to embark on the journey? Because the journey may take several years, and it took me several years. It took me several years of trying to find the place until I actually did find the place, and it happened overnight. None of my audience members say, hey, Alex, you should come over here. I found the county on my own. No one helped me. And my money was saved up from work that I do online to provide the down payment. And then, of course, I thank those that have donated over the years. And Sean, and of course, the too many to mention. Of course, the viewer in Norway. Appreciate their viewership and support as well. And many, many others. But when I look at my own journey, the reality of it, there's been a lot of help behind the scenes, when it came to getting the land. And I chalk it up to, and a lot of people just, they're like, what? I just don't understand. I really believe that if you want to help the world with all of your heart and you actually put it into action and you allow the world to actually walk on you in some cases and you turn the other cheek and you keep moving forward, it's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, to quote Rocky, and to actually live that. It pays off. But it doesn't pay off like this is some sort of a Trump casino like that, where you hit a jackpot and you have it your way right away. And there are too many people in our society, that are looking at things in a very linear Western way, and they want everything right away. They want it now. And they don't want to, they want their cake to eat it too. They don't want to sacrifice the pleasures of the flesh. They cannot go prolonged periods of time without getting laid. And if they are seeing someone, in some cases, they're being someone that they're not in order to get something physical. And so the reality is there's a lot of ways in which people are holding themselves back from being free. And they know it. And they may joke about it and they may laugh about it. But they know it. The question is, do you know it? Do you know what holds you back? And of course, I had to go back to Portland because I had to set myself completely free. I wasn't completely free when I went to Costilla County the first time because I thought about going back to Portland. We're going to make it right this time. It's like a love song, codependent song from some sort of a rock ballad from the late 1980s. Is this love that I'm feeling? And this idea of going back like a superhero energetically to help the people of Portland. And to be welcomed with such a warm return. Alex, great to see you. Here's your car. Here's the side of the street. Here's a blanket. And no one actually did this as for the blanket. I'm just like hypothetical. And good luck, kid. That set me free. That set me free because when I went through that experience and went back to this city where I came out of the womb, and I contemplate my reality and see, ironically, I have no family members in that proximity, that area. I have an uncle, but he has long since forgotten about me. And so, uh, it was closure. It was closure. I was meant to feel that. I was meant to feel that sense of alienation and isolation. To pray again, metaphorically and perhaps literally, but more metaphorically, on my hands and knees, for the universe's direct intervention, for the wounded goddess of Portland, for her to hear me and my cries. And I've talked about all these issues for years. I've tried to help. You've obviously become overrun by archons and parasites, speaking to this feminine goddess occupied spirit of Portland. I've tried to help. I have tried to warn these people. And I see the writing on the wall. Help me get out of here. I don't want to die here. I don't want to remain here. I want to spend whatever remaining years are of my youth in a natural state of being. And just the shedding. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need this. These are the things that set me free in order to be where I am now. My outlook has also changed. It also comes with age. So there's a part of us as men, especially if we haven't been in relationships, anything serious, and especially if we've come from broken families. But there's a part of us that really longs to heal that. And that can be the very thing that traps us. And it's wise to remember that. If someone really loves us, for us, we'll know that. If someone's playing games with us, if someone actually doesn't really care about us, we'll know that too. And it hurts. It hurts when we meet someone and we hope that finally this is something where it's going to lead to something fruitful, and then the familiar returns. And distorted communication and emails over the internet, and wondering if someone's thoughts are their own, literally. And what a world we live in, where so many of my own relationships have been sabotaged. To the point where if I actually even talk about it, it sounds crazy, and people really just don't understand. And so, I can't tell somebody how to get accepted into an off-grid community. I can warn someone and tell them that going off-grid is a journey, and there are forces of good that may be there at your disposal. You should be willing to believe. You should have faith in that direction. You should be looking for the signs. You should be willing to go out and scout and be willing to go out and fall, metaphorically speaking. And you may go out to certain areas in your travels and encounter certain things. And sometimes it's a good thing to be pushed out of certain areas. It was, in the end, a very good thing for me to be pushed out of Costilla County. I wasn't literally pushed out of Costilla County. Costilla County changed their land use code, which made their county no longer desirable, with visits by code enforcement to properties without $30,000 septic systems. That is not happening everywhere in America where there are off-grid communities. And so there are some that are off the radar because there are certain federal regulations and state regulations, and they're coming down on certain counties. And certain counties like Costilla County, of course, changed their land use code when marijuana was legalized because out of concern for an overpopulation in that area, resource depletion, in a state that was also dealing with drought issues. Because the facts are the facts. California has a green rush. The reality is, not everybody goes off-grid to grow marijuana or grow meth or whatever, make meth. I'm not meaning to put marijuana and meth in the same category. But it is a stereotype that it's about, doing drugs or smoking pot to go off-grid. It's an insult to all humans that came before us, that lived aside nature, to where living in nature was a part of a spiritual practice. It's an insult to Buddhists. It's an insult to many Christians. It's an insult to many Sufis. But of course, insulting the culture of the Middle East is nothing new for this modern day Babylonian society, where many people actually do not even know their own common history. You know, there are certain people out there that are actively using their consciousness to send negativity to others, and yet they live off grid. Yet they want to see other countries bomb back to the Stone Age. They want to see refugees stuck in concentration camps. They want to see victims of war raped again and again and again. There are certain people out there that are experiencing certain good things in the good times. And what I'll say is, just because some of these areas are off grid doesn't mean that they're all going to be safe. And just because a neighborhood is invaded doesn't mean that every door is going to have its door kicked in. Just like when there's a war on off-the-grid living, not every property is actually visited by code enforcement. And sometimes it's karma, why, certain things happen, and sometimes it's because we're being tested, or, in the case of murder, we're being taken out of the situation, or taken out of the game, in which we sometimes, if you're able to see the possibility, we live different realities in different lifetimes. And that's wherever you want to take it. So I would even say that going back to certain areas or visiting certain areas on the planet, maybe we're revisiting. Maybe we're coming home. Maybe there's a part of our soul that recognizes that latitude, longitude. And that's how I feel about Costilla County and many parts of Colorado. And it actually seems like some of the actual paths that I've taken are paths that the Utes have taken as well. If we look at Costilla County and some of the other areas that I've been, and then back down and the travels and even the directions, and then where I am now in southwest Colorado, more in the direction of the Four Corners, but not exactly there, but more in that direction towards Arizona, away from Denver. There's a reason I'm here in this ancient stomping grounds of the Hopi, also known as the Anasazi. Sometimes I look at just the word Anasazi and I look at my last name, Ansari. And they're not connected, but yet, I look at them again. Ansari, Anasazi, Anasazi, Ansari. And sometimes, maybe I just think too hard about certain things. And is there something wrong with that? Is there something wrong about asking the ultimate questions, even if the answers are not prevalent or arriving immediately upon our demand? So it's really about gnosis and knowledge, inner light, inner wisdom, inner peace, inner harmony, self-healing, providing yourself with the very things that you need. There's physical, there's emotional, there's spiritual. So being independent, folks, I've shared a lot with you in this 1 hour podcast. It is deeply philosophical. It starts with your own consciousness. It starts with you unplugging psychologically from the matrix and negative people, places, and things. You free your mind and your body will follow. It's not about all the stuff. It's not about, it's important that your family is on board if they're going to be with you in this. But you can't make someone share your vision. Like Gnostics, it's an extreme minority of the human population, those that actually seek to know, and those that actually truly seek to be off the grid. It's also a very small percentage of the population. And those that seek to be off the grid and also be spiritually minded, it's an even smaller demographic. And I think that's where a lot of you come in. And so again, it is psychological, it is spiritual, it is emotional. Okay, there are things that you need to wrap up that are within you, that have nothing to do with somebody else. And it's all within you. But that expectation of someone else getting it, your wife, your girlfriend, getting it, your husband, your boyfriend, getting it, if they haven't gotten it already, my friend, my brother, my sister, You need to check yourself if you're waiting for someone to just get it. And you need to identify whether you're in lust or you're actually with the right person. Telling you what, man, I'm going to wrap it up at this point. Whether we're talking about platonic relationships of same sex or romantic relationships, one of the most important piece of advice that I can give is be very careful who your off-grid associations are. And do everything in your power to become as independent as possible. Not dependent on supposed intentional communities run by people that in many cases have control freak behaviors. I would like to see, like, someone that I know start an intentional community that works. I'd love to be able to show people and travel to it. You know, surely out of all these people that have worked their whole life, how many people have called me a bum for so many years? Surely somebody has the resources from all this slave work to actually, you know, put some money down on some land. But the reality is, people don't have that. Spending all of this human time and attention working jobby jobs in the grid have not actually freed a lot of these get a job types. A lot of them are still stuck, mentally masturbating about A-team survivalism, as seen on YouTube. Okay. Or Black Belt Magazine. Or Soldier of Fortune. Or the Bundy Times. Oh, dear. So I'm going to come back. Let me know if you benefited from this podcast, if it shined a greater light on certain things. Ladies, there are certain people out there that are going to just love to have you in their intentional community. And if your ego is not in check, you may actually think as well it's your spiritual essence and not your ass. Okay. And I've seen it. I've been there. And also be aware of the woofing organizations. Okay, you got to understand when you have people that are advertising, hey, come here, we're a happy, hippie, vegan community. Some of those are run by sociopaths that are actually just going through the people that visit them because they're looking for partners. And sometimes they're straight, sometimes they're bisexual, sometimes they're gay. But they're just going through people, or they just want the right dudes and worshipers around them because they're the dude, yo. They're the dude. And I've seen enough of it. And there's also versions where there's like couples where they're like, they're in an artificial hierarchy matrix above all these other couples because they're the organizers or they're the owners of the property. And so things revolve around, you know, the mama bear and the papa bear. And it's a very weird energy dynamic. But it seems to be the mass way of consciousness, like biology, to where people are either leading or following. And then a very small percentage are choosing to just abstain from being a master or a slave. Okay, so I think that there should be some positive examples of some intentional communities. But after hundreds of emails of people that claim that they were coming out to Costilla County to do it, all I've seen is the armchair intellectuals that never even came when it was the perfect time to come to Costilla County. So, if you want to show me what a real intentional community is, you don't do it by linking to John Bush or a YouTube video to people that you don't actually know. It's you yourself doing it. It's you, your friend down the street. It's not strangers on YouTube fronting something that ain't real, but actually something you can touch, taste, document, and pick up on a phone and talk to. So, demonstrative, intentional communities, not run by sociopaths. Show me the money. In the meantime, I'm Alex Ansari, wrapping up this podcast for November 3rd, 2016.